Hello and welcome to The Build Up. This is the podcast for marketing in the construction industry. I'm Dan, the creative director at Dissident. We've been working with construction brands for a number of years. It's an exciting and rapidly evolving industry, and that's why we created a podcast dedicated to the weird and wonderful world of construction marketing. I'll be speaking to leading brands, other agencies, creatives, influencers and startups. This is the resource I wish we had when we first started out in the industry. Thank you for being here and welcome to The Build Up. Welcome to another episode of The Build Up. I'm Dan, the creative director of Dissident Creative Agency. We are a social-first creative agency that specializes in working with construction brands to create epic social media content and some other stuff, I think, probably. That'll do, won't it, Keith?
Yeah?
And today I am joined by Russell Payne, who is the host of the Talking Tradesman podcast. I shouldn't have needed to look at my notes on that because I can see it on your hoodie. It's an absolute pleasure. I hope this goes well. Two podcast hosts on a podcast together. What could go wrong, right?
Absolutely, mate. I mean, I keep being called a podcast host, which is a massive compliment because I'm a huge amateur.
Yes.
So there we go.
we'll just like swap notes the whole time.
That's it. Yeah.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for coming over. We're going to have like a bit of a discussion around kind of your background, the podcast. I really want to push people towards your podcast.
Appreciate that.
But I think we want to talk about podcasts in general as a marketing tool, how brands and content creators can kind of utilize them. And we'll try and figure it out. We both know that there's a massive opportunity there, but I think a lot of people feel like it's still like oversaturated because they've been going for so long and stuff. But we'll get into it. But I would be remiss without hearing a little bit more about yourself and kind of your backstory, because I'd be really interested to hear a little bit more about that and what led you up to creating the Talking Tradesman. So
yeah, sure.
Could you give us a run through of like your history, like in the trade, and kind of like and up to the point where you started the podcast?
Yeah, of course, Dan. Yeah, you'll have to push me along, mate, if I'm dragging it out a bit too much, because it's probably a 10-year journey into starting the podcast. There's a lot of background stuff that led me there. Trade-wise, we'll start there. So I am a third-generation painter and decorator.
Cool. My
son is now my apprentice, so he's fourth generation.
Wicked.
I don't know whether that's really a good thing to shout about or quite sad, but we're in the painting and decorating industry.
It's obviously working, you know what I mean? There's a draw there, isn't there?
That's it, mate. So family business, I've spent most of my life, in fact, I've spent my life in and around construction. I've done a few different roles. I started going to work with my dad when I was about 8 years old. More out of necessity than anything. My parents split up when I was 8. I stayed with my dad. So like summer holidays, Easter holidays, Christmas, I had to go to work with him because he had to work. So there was no option there. There was an option for me as to, it wasn't child labour, like you're coming to graft.
Yeah.
But it was a choice of, you can either sit around reading magazines, because there was no such thing as iPads and stuff like that then.
I feel like we're of a similar-ish age where it's like you could have been on the Generation 1 Game Boy or something like that.
Oh, I don't even think they were out, if I'm honest with you. Mobile phones certainly weren't.
Yeah.
Technology-wise, it was just non-existent. It was like 442 magazine.
Yeah, and
that was
a packet of crisps.
Yeah. So my dad was there. He was like, look, you can read magazines or I will pay you a nominal amount, like peanuts really, pocket money. You can start stripping wallpaper. You can start doing a bit of prep work, this, that and the other. So I did. And the culmination of that is by the age of 15, I was running jobs for him.
Wicked.
So I was fully immersed in the business. I actually took over the business at 17. So I've been running the business now 24 years, which will give my age away. Been in the trade for a long time.
You took it over from 17. So what did your dad do? Retire or something?
No, family's for you. Me and my dad went our own separate ways.
Okay.
So we had a big bust up at 17. I actually didn't speak to him for 8 years. I had a choice. There was a 1 year sort of like period where I left school, started doing agency work, doing that kind of thing, and then quickly realised that actually decorating wasn't that bad. Picked up the business at 17. Financial, mate. That was my drive at that point in time, because I knew I'd got the skills to do it, and I've got this opportunity sat there of like a full man's wage versus, menial sort of tasks. I did well at school. There's a lot of sort of like tradesmen out there that will sit there and go, they went into the trade because they didn't do very well in their exams. Sure. As it happened, I did pretty well. Passed all my exams, did my A-levels, but just decided that academia wasn't for me at that point. Ironically, I then fell back into it like 20 years later.
Yeah. Were you, just out of interest, were you one of these kids that was like not super into learning? It just kind of came naturally. It's just like you're like one of these people that can just like a sponge. It kind of came in and you could do relatively well on sort of minimal effort, but it wasn't like you were like a nerd.
Yeah, I didn't put any effort in, mate. I was one of those frustrating kids, I guess, that didn't revise and still passed everything.
Same.
When I was young, my focus was I just wanted to play football. That was it. I was never going to be a professional. I was never one of these could-have-beens. I used to play to a relatively decent amateur level, and that was it. That was all I was interested in was playing football. My family circumstances dictated to me that I needed to earn money and get out of the house, if I'm honest. So that was it. I was like, I need to do something to get myself independent. So I had to grow up very quick. I was very mature for my age and took over the business at 17.
Were you only child as well, did you say?
No, I got a younger sister.
Okay.
But the way my family split, my mum and dad split up. My sister went with my mum.
Okay.
I stayed with my dad. And my dad, he was painter and decorator himself, so self-employed, but he used to work 7 days a week. He was a big drinker. So I raised myself, mate. Yeah. You know, very independent from that age. Got into the trade and here I am 24 years later. I've worked as a contract manager in amongst that. So I did go shirt and trousers for a short period of time. I've worked within my industry. I've touched on every demographic. I've done commercial work. I've done private work. I've done council work. And now the business has settled in high-end domestic. So I've been in that demographic for about the past 5-6 years now.
Are you still on the tools?
Yeah, still very much on the tools, mate. Yeah, 99% of the time I'm hands-on. I've tried running it from a management position. I don't know whether it's me being I need the control, but certainly the industry that I work in now and the demographic that I work in now, being high-end domestic, is very difficult to expand because the quality of the finish has got to be like exquisite every time. And the labour that's available, it isn't always possible to achieve that with a big team. Yeah. So, I've settled into that, still very much on the tools, and then also now running the podcast. So, spinning many plates, mate.
Mad. Really, really cool story. I've got so many more questions, but I might save those for another time because it's the family business type thing and relationships and stuff. That
was a whole rabbit hole there, mate. Yeah, we could sit here for a long time talking about that.
I think that perhaps that's more better say for your podcast and kind of how that affects you and things like that. But for so you on the tools, doing great, set up on your own, doing your own stuff, and then how did the podcast come about?
Yeah, so the podcast, as I said before, it was probably a 10-year journey to get there, which might sound a bit strange because the podcast's only been out a year. I'll try and condense this. So 30 years old, went through a divorce.
Okay.
Right. My podcast, as you're aware, but for your listeners, centres around raising mental health awareness, breaking down the stigmas around talking about mental health, and construction being at a point of crisis when it comes to mental health. The statistics within construction at the minute are horrendous.
Scary, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, are you aware of the figures?
No, not like to the number.
I can run through them quickly for you. And they're hard to hear, mate. I'll be honest with you. When I say construction's at crisis, what highlights that? The construction industry in the UK is the worst industry to be in for male suicide.
Whoa.
It's got the highest figures. Not only are they the highest figures, you're 4 times more likely as a man in construction to take your own life than another trade. On average, at the moment, 2 men a day are taking their own life in the trades. That's 14 people a week. Credit to On The Tools, they've just launched a big campaign called The Lost City.
Yeah,
and that highlights those numbers. So that's 700 men a year, 7,000 men over the last decade. And that's the point that we're at the moment. It's not being talked about enough. So I launched the podcast to try and address that. The reason that my origin story in that, as I probably started 10 years ago, went through a divorce at around 30 years old. And that was the first point in my life where I ever paid any attention to my mental health.
Yeah.
I was completely ignorant to it before then. I would have been that lad that would have sat around going, I haven't got it, mate. Mental health, I ain't got it.
Yeah.
You know, which I know now, to caveat, is complete nonsense. Everybody has mental health, just the same way as physical health. It might just be that your mental health is really good.
Yes.
And generally speaking, when something is good, you don't pay it any attention. I highlight that, mate. You probably didn't wake up this morning and think to yourself, I've got a left arm. You would have if it was broken.
Yes.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't pay any attention to things that aren't broken. So a lot of people go through life with mental health being in a good position. They only pay attention to it when it goes wrong.
Yes.
That was my point. So when I went through that divorce, I went through a 2.5-year legal battle, solicitors' fees, all the usual stuff. It wasn't any different to a lot of people's divorces, but it was not a smooth one. Brought along with it its challenges on a mental perspective. And that was the first time where I personally experienced things like anxiety, a couple of potential borderline panic attacks relating to the proceedings that were going on. And that was the first time in my life that I'd ever paid any attention to mental health. Fortunately, I had somebody in my life that pointed it out to me. Initially, I was very, I tried to push back on it. No, I'm not. You know, I was told you're experiencing anxiety. My response was, of course I'm not, I'm fine.
Yeah.
You know, made myself look into it. Once I actually realised that I was, my way of dealing with it, I never went to therapy. Maybe I should. I'd love to explore therapy. I've never done it. I use that age-old excuse of not got time.
Yeah.
But I'd love to explore it. However, what I did was my own version of therapy, which was to jump into education.
Okay.
So I became fascinated by the physical manifestation of your thoughts.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is if I were to say to you, you do realise that high stress levels can cause heart attacks, you wouldn't argue with me.
No.
Like, that's quite commonly known fact.
Yes.
Yet, if you were to try and say that in reverse, so if you would, what I've always found interesting here is the yin and yang of it. Everybody accepts that stress can cause various physical ailments, whether that's bad stomachs, bad skin, heart attacks in the
Cancer.
extreme, all sorts. If you try and reverse that and go, well, if your positive thoughts can have positive effects on the body, most people kind of go, oh, that's like voodoo.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
woo-woo,
It's a bit hippie, which has always intrigued me. But I went down this big rabbit hole of education, so I became fascinated with what was triggered by my own physical manifestations of stress. So I started studying psychology, started studying philosophy, Buddhism, evolutional psychology. And if I'm honest, it was to understand myself.
Yes.
So I went down this journey and it really hit a chord where I started to find a bit of purpose in what I was doing. So I decided I was going to formally study psychology and I was going to lean into counselling and therapy, that kind of thing, that kind of field. So started doing a BSc honours degree in psychology. And when you go so far down that, you have to pick one of three options. You have to go into sports psychology, child psychology, or counselling and therapy. I wanted to do counselling and therapy, so I went that way. To get some experience, I started volunteering at Samaritans. So I did 18 months volunteering. In fact, I've only recently stopped doing that because of the amount of time that I'm now putting into the podcast. But we're getting there, don't worry.
No, it's
I'm
good.
going to loop it round.
No, it's good. It's good to get the context.
18 months worth of volunteering at Samaritans. What I started to realise, because I was taking the phone calls, I mean, Samaritans, for anyone listening, incredible organisation. If anyone's struggling out there, 116 123 is always somebody listening. I'll always put that out there. I was taking these phone calls, and what I realised was a lot of the people I was talking to were people in the trades.
Yeah.
So, and not that I would ask for the information, but being in the trades myself, you could quickly kind of work it out.
There's a patter. There's something going on there. Yeah.
And I'd sort of ask the question, how's work? How's your work life? Oh, yeah, I'm under a bit of pressure. I'm a builder, or I'm under a bit of pressure. I'm a carpenter, whatever it might be. And I started to realise I'm speaking to a lot of tradespeople. So then I started looking into the statistics and I found out some of the stats that I've just told you. I mean, suicide is also the biggest killer of men under 50. And then you correlate that with, well, hold on. So it's the biggest killer of men under 50. And if I'm in construction, I'm 4 times more likely to take my own life. We're already 75% of all suicides are men. So as a man in construction under 50, it's not a particularly good place to be, in theory. So I started looking at this, and it was offhand a conversation with my wife one day. I went home after doing a shift at Samaritans and said, I feel like I need to bring together the knowledge that I'm gaining through education and the experience and the training of Samaritans and somehow target my industry because there's a problem.
Yes.
It was an offhand comment, Dan, and I turned around and I said, maybe I could do a podcast and start talking to people, get people talking. And that was always the thing. People need to talk. Men need to talk. Men don't talk. You know, a lot of people will say that. And that was where it was born. I've got to credit my wife, if I'm honest, because it was a concept to me, thrown out very haphazardly, and she ran away with it. So a couple of days after we had this conversation, which, if I'm honest, I forgot about, she turned around to me and went, "You free on Tuesday?" I said, "No, I'm at work. Why? We're going to see an office space. Why do we need an office space? You know, the podcast." I was like, "What podcast?" You know, and that was how it went, mate. That was how it started. She went and viewed the unit and actually signed the lease without me knowing about it.
Right.
So she went and viewed it and was like, "Yep, I viewed it. It's good. 12-month tenancy. You know, now you've got to refurb it into a podcast studio." And that was the birth of the Talking Tradesman. And from there, it has took a path I never expected it to. The growth has been brilliant, and it seems to have really hit that spot of where the need is. And I'm privileged to say that I'm now sat here having spoken to over 50 guests. I think we're about 56 published episodes, something like that.
Really cool.
Of people that have wanted to come in, talk about their experiences, not only the low points of mental health, but also the high points, as in, this is how I've coped with this. You know, I've been in construction for however long. These are the problems. This is how I deal with it. So it offers, hopefully, insight and knowledge and a bit of support to people.
That's really cool. And so 50 guests, all based around construction as a rule?
Mostly, I'd say probably 40.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've mixed it in a little bit. So a lot of my guests are in the construction industry, but I've also mixed that in with some mental health professionals.
Great.
And then just some people that have been through, I guess, what I'd describe as extreme mental adversity. So particularly traumatic events that they've sort of gone through, mental resilience. The thing with mental health, it crosses all borders.
Yes.
I'm trying to address a particular audience in construction that are really struggling right now. But those mental health issues, whether it's stress, anxiety, depression, trauma, that crosses all borders. It doesn't matter whether you're a builder, a postman, a policeman, like, we all have the struggles.
Yes.
So people's tales, whether it's, you know, I'll pick one out of a hat, bereavement, everyone's going to experience it. Everyone's going to suffer it. So somebody's story of how they've got through that is applicable to everyone.
Absolutely. And what I found quite interesting about what you mentioned earlier about when you started to suffer with your own mental health problems is you didn't recognize them as being mental health problems initially.
No.
And you had to almost get diagnosed by another person to go, that's this.
Yeah.
I think being able to, 'cause I think there's a lot of talk about, and some people will be quite negative about, we're talking about it enough. Like, you know, let's look at other areas, and people are always drawn on about mental health. But I think one of the amazing benefits of just talking about mental health, even if you're not coming to a conclusion, this is how you fix it, because it's difficult to fix, is the fact that a lot of these guys don't even realize that they've got anxiety, for instance. They don't know how to notice the signs of anxiety.
Yeah.
And once you notice the signs of anxiety, you can then treat it to some extent. But if you don't know what it is, you go, oh my God, like I feel terrible. As soon as someone diagnoses you with something, you go, oh, that, and so, and you, with that, you have this, and this, and you start to feel these things, and you notice that you're having these thoughts on the regular. You notice that you can't sleep because you, and you're like, oh yeah, that's me. You go, okay, at least that's progress towards a solution, which is to get rid of it, ideally,
Absolutely,
or at least to manage it.
I mean, there's a caveat there, which is that a lot of these things are natural.
Yeah.
So there is, I guess, a little bit of an issue around labelling, and that's where the pushback comes, because people will sort of go, oh, well, everything's labelled anxiety or depression now. And there are examples of that. You can't deny it. However, there's also it's a fact that everybody will experience anxiety because it's a human emotion. We're meant to have it.
Yes.
It would have been a survival thing. So evolutional psychology would have taught us anxiety was developed because we needed it to survive, right? Because that bush that was rattling, that could have been a tiger, it could have been a bear, it could have been a wolf, whatever. That's a natural thing that is installed in us to react to dangerous situations. The problem is the society we live in now, stimulus around us is very, very different. So the anxiety that we now get is over like work deadlines
Yes.
and things of that accord.
Social anxiety.
Exactly. And often you can't cure it. I can't do anything. I can't say to you now, right, Dan, if you follow steps 1 to 3, you will never have anxiety again. You will.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can recognize it, identify it, and then build up your own coping mechanisms. And the problem with non-acceptance of mental health is you can't build a coping mechanism to something that you won't accept exists.
Yes.
And those coping mechanisms are the ones everyone knows. Exercise is great. Get out, fresh air is great. You know, just going for a walk, you'll feel better.
Yeah.
You know, getting out, moving, talking to somebody. So one of the great things I took away from working with Samaritans, because when you're a volunteer with Samaritans, you're not allowed to give advice. It's a listening service.
Sure.
And what I got to witness firsthand was the power of that, because through the power of a conversation, whether it was 10 minutes or an hour, by the end of the phone call, 90% of people were in a totally different headspace. I haven't given them a cure or a solution. I've just sat and listened and empathized with what they had to say. And often people just need to organize their thoughts and then bring it out the other side, and they're in a much better spot. So the talking side of it, that it's really important.
It's its own treatment.
Absolutely.
In that respect.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't go too much into like my own issues with mental health, because that's not what this conversation's about. But it's something that sort of triggered my mind a little bit. Was I've suffered for years with health anxiety. The classic example of like, I'm terrified of getting cancer, even though I live really unhealthily. Like, I should really try and look after my diet and sleep and stress levels and stuff like that. I'm terrified of getting cancer, and there was I remember the first time it was triggered. I think I've always had these kind of weird thoughts, and this is the thing, that it's like spotting things that aren't an issue until they've boiled up to being an issue. I'd always had thoughts about like dying young and stuff like that. I thought, you know, that's the way I'm going. And I had a problem with my ankle, and they had an MRI scan, and they saw this big black mass in my leg, and they were like, okay. And then I remember like going into the specialist and looking at the MRI results, and he's like, oh, I didn't realize it was you. I wish I could have saved you some time. I've had to refer you on to a specialist. And he was like really kind of like scatty with, like, he didn't want to tell me anything. He didn't want to show me anything because it wasn't. So I sort of perceived that as being something other than it was. And he said, we found this area in your leg. There's this big black mass. So we need to investigate this further. I'm going to send you on to a specialist. It's probably this, but if it's something serious, I'll obviously we'll deal. And I was like, what do you mean serious? He's like, cancer. And I was like, and I could feel my whole body just go woof, and this like wave of like fear came over me. And I'd had like moles and stuff checked out before, and it wasn't a big deal. But it was the way that on this particular day, I remember the drive home. And there was like, my body felt different, my mind felt different. I was like almost like an out of body experience and stuff like that. And anyway, I'm getting to the point where I actually spoke to somebody about this who's a psychologist, because I was feeling so bad. I couldn't function. I couldn't look after my kids. I was so terrified all the time. Yeah, but I didn't know what was going on. So I just thought I was dying. I was 100% convinced I'm going to die. And I was waiting for these results. I was ringing the guy up the next day. He was trying to like put me at ease, and I wasn't listening to him because I'd only focused on this one thing. And I remember speaking to somebody. It's like a twofold thing. I remember speaking to my friend who's a psychologist, and she asked me some questions. She's like, "You've got health anxiety. Like this is what's happened is you've been given some information, and you've taken that to the worst possible scenario without looking at the facts, and kind of construing them all as like, the guys literally said it's very, very unlikely this is cancer, but I have to refer you on to a specialist to rule it out. And but I wasn't listening to that. I'm like, what about the 10%, the 5% or whatever? So as soon as she told me I had health anxiety, she's like, so first of all, like I understood what was going on in my body, so I could kind of go, oh, okay, that like there's a part of me that's like on one half of me says constantly to myself all down, you're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die. Chemo, blah blah blah. All these, you're going through all these like stuff in your head. You're not gonna see your kids grow up, blah blah blah. And then there's like a little part that's growing and growing that's saying, it's just health anxiety. Don't listen to it, you know. But having that kind of like almost, although like I say, it's a name for it, giving it a name, giving it a term, sometimes can be a little bit more difficult. But at least I knew then that like I've just triggered something that just was laying dormant in me, but then it literally broke me. Like it was so weird. Like I just could not function as a person. I didn't realize that, you know, you don't realize that these things can come out of nowhere, and it's like it's never been the same since. I'm still terrified of dying of cancer. But another thing that you talked about then that I think is really important is just the fact that just being able to speak to someone, even if they don't give you a solution, especially with things like health anxiety, is enough to go, I sound like a complete nutter. Like I sound like a crazy person. All of these crazy thoughts that I've got in my head, being able to talk and sort of like get them out of your head can sometimes either make you realize, I'm actually like, this isn't real. This isn't happening. These are just my thoughts. My thoughts are getting away from me.
The mind is a scary place.
Yeah, especially if you leave it alone. Yeah, you know. But if you like I say, if you can get that kind of stuff out and speak to someone, and they can go, it doesn't sound like you're in any kind of danger or
often
worry.
The thing with it, Dan, that like what you just said there, you had a particular event that triggered it to a point where you could no longer hide it. So it came to the surface. You couldn't keep it in.
Yeah.
A lot of the time what we do is we keep it in, like it's like right up until that point. So there's people out there that will live with various levels of health anxieties, depressions, anxieties over 101 things in life. They'll never talk about.
No.
But it will never reach the point where it externalizes itself.
Yes.
To me, I think the best thing we can do is raise awareness as high as we can because, and this, I mean, I'm not going to go down this because this would be a huge rabbit hole, mate, but the education just isn't there.
No.
So we're never taught things. And that was my own thing. Like I hit 30 years old and went through a crisis that a lot of people would have struggled with. You know, on paper, I lost everything. I lost my house, I lost my car, I lost my kids. My kids moved 200 miles away. So I went through all this and then 2.5 years of legal battles. There's not many people that would get through that without what I experienced. No. However, nobody in my life, because of the generational thing, like my dad was of a certain generation, I'm of a certain generation. It's, if for want of a better word, the man up generation, the men don't cry generation.
Just got to deal with it.
But nobody ever sat me down. I never had a conversation about mental health in my life.
Yeah.
By 30, mental health to me, one of the biggest things I think that needs to be made completely aware. There's a huge difference between mental health and mental illness. They are not the same.
Okay.
So mental health, everybody has it, mate. That is exactly the same as your physical health.
It's a spectrum.
Just everyone has it. It's an identifiable thing.
Yes.
You might go your whole life with good mental health. Brilliant. That's fantastic. The problem is people confuse the two. So they confuse the fact that if you're talking about having poor mental health, that means you're mentally ill. No. Mentally ill, those are your diagnosable conditions, your bipolars, your schizophrenics, your things that need medical, attention and help. That's a mental illness.
Okay.
Something that is, diagnosable and an illness. Mental health is just, that's your spectrum. That's your 100% good at the top, 0% bad at the bottom.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there's quite a lot of people, certainly in construction, that are walking around maybe only on 20, 30% a lot of the time. But they don't want to vocalise it because they fear the labelling of being labelled mentally ill through talking about their mental health. Two very different things that sound the same.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I'm trying to make more mainstream, in that people, if you have a bad day at work, right, I don't know, you get up in the morning, you stub your toe, it's raining outside, you go downstairs, your dog's crapped on the floor, that's your mental health. Like your mental health just went from 100 down to 80.
Yeah.
You've had a bad start to the day. That is mental health.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Your mood, your, the way that you feel in yourself, your levels, that is your mental health. It can go up, it can go down, and things in life will affect it. We're all human, we all have it.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. The problem is, because it is so stigmatized at the moment, the talking about it and the image being that it either makes you weak to talk about it or that it makes you mentally ill to talk about it, is dangerous. Because there are so many men in particular, and I talk about men, one, because I am one, and two, because the statistics are what they are within construction, which is male dominated. But obviously mental health affects all genders.
Yes.
I'll be honest, women are better talking than men.
Yes.
So to me, my mission is to try and level that playing field a little, make it a bit more normal to talk about your mental health, you know, as you would have any other conversation. And that's been the mission of the podcast. So yeah, that's where we're at with it, really.
And what about results? Like, are you seeing people come forward like from the podcast and being like, this has helped me massively? Like,
I've had a lot of really moving messages, mate. I really have. Some fantastic messages. And one of the big takeaways, and I want to sort of get this one out here, is this. I've had, I think, about 56 guests. And there's this conception of men don't want to talk, men don't talk, men bottle it up. I've actually found, because, and here's one thing for you. So out of 56 guests, I've only asked 2 people to come on. Everybody else has reached out to me and said that they wanted to come on and they've got a story to tell.
Amazing.
So what this has left me feeling is that actually men do want to talk. We just need to know that there's somebody listening. Because, and you'll see it on my top here, let's talk, let's listen. Listening is equally as important, because if there's nobody listening, nobody will talk. You know what I mean? We need to know that there's a point in talking. So we need to, again, as a society, as people in an environment at work or socially, we need to take the responsibility on to provide a safe space for people around us to talk. So we need to listen. And that was one of the biggest things I took away from my time at Samaritans, was learning to listen. Sounds easy. It's not. You know, a lot of people will listen to respond. You'll be talking to me and I'm already thinking what I'm going to say back.
Especially blokes.
And blokes always want to fix it. So you turn up to me and you go, oh, mate, I'm struggling. I've had a bad day at work. I've had this. Try this, Dan. Try this, try that. You don't actually want to hear that. No. You just want to offload it.
Yeah.
You know, you're not actually looking for a solution. And learning that is a big thing. Providing that safe space. And hopefully that's what the podcast has done, is that people have invested into listening into it and noticed that there's that safe space there and people are coming forward. So, yeah, it's a whole circle of events that needs to happen in order to improve things. But yeah, I've had some incredible responses, some great messages of support, and people confiding that it's made a difference to them. So yeah, it's heartwarming moments, I guess.
It's an amazing achievement. Like, you know, like say 56 guests, and like for the majority of those guys are wanting to come on, and a lot of these guys are names to some extent in the industry. Yeah, and being like, I want to bear all about my experiences of of having issues with my mental health, and it sounds like it's doing an incredible job of raising awareness, but also there's that thing of the goal of just getting people to talk about it. You know, great branding, obviously, like the Talking Tradesman, but just being able to offload your thoughts is like the first. I guess it's almost like Alcoholics Anonymous. So that the first thing is to admit you're an alcoholic in some respect. The first thing to do with mental health is to talk about it. You know, just
mate, absolutely. The first thing to do is to admit that you have it.
Yeah.
Everyone's got it. I've got it. You've got it. You've got it. We've all got it. Like, everyone's got it. Nobody's immune to mental health.
Keelan will have terrible mental health from working here. Honestly, I feel so bad for Keelan. Like I'm surprised. Like, Keelan doesn't just go home and cry every single night for how much he gets abused here.
Really?
Yeah. And I feel bad about it.
You can make a claim for things like that now, don't you?
Like, I feel bad every day. I feel like, oh man, like I proper took the piss out of Keelan today. And then, but he just laughs it off. But I guarantee he'll be suffering inside.
Do you know what? Like I said, it's so important just for people to recognise they have it.
Yes.
That doesn't mean it's got to be bad.
No.
Like, you could turn around, yes, I've got mental, I'll sit here now. I've got mental health at the moment. It's good.
Yeah.
You know, things are good. It's good. I'm feeling good. Life's good. Few stresses here and there. Who hasn't? You know, but there's nothing that's pushing me over any edges or limits right now. But that can change. It can change to anybody, and quite often it's the unexpected things. You know, the phone call you weren't expecting, those tragic phone calls that people get, and that, how can you sit there and say that doesn't affect your mental health? Of course it does.
Yeah. That mate, it's not. What about so if we take this back to like construction brands, like so for the individual, like let's say you're an individual tradesperson, you're not working for somebody, you're doing your own thing. What they can do is the first step they can do is talk about it, admit it, and talk about it. See, within their network, within their safe space or something. I'm sure there are places that they can go, like Samaritans, to open up to people. What about like brands and tier one contractors? These guys who are people who are heavily involved with tradespeople. Are there things that you recommend that would be like an actionable thing that they could do to help support the tradespeople's mental health, the tradespeople that are specifically like under their wing? There's certain like things that you can kind of put in place, or like companies that you can get involved. I'm thinking like welfare or checks, or having specialists that work within the actual business, to like a counsellor, stuff like that.
Do you know what, Dan? This is one of the potential issues in construction at the moment, is that there isn't a lot of that.
No.
You'll go to other industries and they'll have things appointed like mental health first aiders. You'll have, and these are some of the things construction's lacking, certainly with the high proportion of self-employed. We haven't got HR departments. We haven't really got people looking over our shoulder. I could work 120 hours this week. Nobody's checking on me. No. Nobody's tapping me on the shoulder going, Russ, calm it. You've done too much, or we're going to enforce holiday on you now because you've done too many hours. That's where construction's lacking, in my opinion. So in terms of change, then the thoughts about things like, your mental health first aiders, appointing people in position where people know it's safe to go and talk if they're struggling. Not the whole. There's such a huge issue, Dan, to be honest. And that's why the stats are there what they are. If there was an easy answer, I'd hope it would already be in action, and that somebody would be taking that to address it.
It's more of a cultural problem, isn't it? It's like you can, although it's really, really good to for these brands and for the for the tier one contractors or whatever to put in stuff in place. And it's really valiant for you to do that, but it's the problems are coming from the industry, not necessarily the job or the whoever. People
do follow though. Yeah. So if the brands were to get behind the message, get behind the push for support, pick up the baton that a few of us are waving now. And one of the things I am very conscious of is there are a few of us out there that are raising awareness, but awareness isn't necessarily action for change. Yes. So it's one thing talking about it, and I think in general mental health is now talked about more than ever. There's just not action to back it up.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just coming. It's a slow progress for change. But if brands were to get on that message as well, support it, promote it, talk about the normality of it, then it can only go towards positive change. I don't think any negativity can come from that. You're talking about marketing. This is a marketing podcast. I would say that supporting mental health is a strong marketing position.
Yes.
You can't look bad supporting mental health.
It's the strategy that a lot of brands are, taking on, because it's kind of a win-win. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like doing charitable work.
Of course.
Everybody wins in that, and that's why charities are successful, because you've got, that charities are doing something good. The brand's doing something good by supporting a charity. Everybody wins from that. But if that brand didn't get involved with the charity, they'd be worse off. Yeah. Both parties would be worse off. So it's amazing.
Well, that's exactly what brands in construction can do, because you're also then going to build that relationship between the brand and the person using whatever the product or whatever the service or whatever it might be is. Because once people in the trades, I think there's an overwhelming feeling, certainly from the self-employed demographic, that nobody really cares about us. We're kind of left out on our own to do our own thing.
Yes.
And there's nobody really watching. So it goes a long way when you do get the odd brand that sort of starts supporting mental health within the trades or supporting tradespeople. Then you get that sort of, in life, everyone's looking for their tribe. And if you get a brand that starts to create its own tribe, and there's a few good examples out there of brands that have started to do that and look after tradespeople, bring them in, create a family. Am I allowed to mention brands?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
CT1, great example, probably the biggest known one out there. But that's what they've done. They've pull together your content creators, and from the outside looking in, and I've got no affiliation with CT1 currently. I've got no affiliation, but from me looking in, I look at them and I think they look like a family. They look like they're having a great time.
Yeah.
They, there looks like there's support there. If more brands were to get on, there's a few in my industry, in the painting and decorating industry, that are starting to do similar things.
Yes.
There's a brand called Arrowworthy, the painting and decorating show. They had a lot of their own ambassadors around the stage and around the stand. And you hear about the things, they're taking them out for meals, they're putting them in hotels, and it's a trade-off. They're not doing it because there's no upside to them. Of course there's an upside to them. But if brands were to get behind supporting the people, the men on the ground, or the women on the ground, the people on the ground, then to me, there's only a win there. And utilising things like we were discussing before, utilising podcasts for both, for the brand to deliver their key ethics, if you like, behind the brand, and for the content creators that are working with the brand to open up a little bit more about the person behind the face of the content.
Yeah. Do you know what? There's so many avenues that you could go down. Like I was just thinking about the CT1 thing, or other brands that have got this kind of like you say, like a lot of them will have it. The brands that we work with will often have this kind of like group of people that like they're our guys. These are our like mates in the industry that promote our product, whether we pay them or not.
Yeah.
What if you could do like little gatherings where you get together and actually just go, do you know what? I'm just going to support you. Like here's, we're going to do a day of fun, and there's going to be like a little talk, or there's going to be someone that comes along who's like a professional in psychology and something that can benefit your mental health, and we can have some takeaways. And what we'd love for you to do is share those takeaways with your audience.
Exactly.
That'd be mad, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like here's a day. It's not going to cost the brand a lot of money. Obviously, everything costs money. But let's go and do like a mental healthy kind of day where we can all learn some stuff that we didn't know before, and do us a favor, share that knowledge, and have like so we can almost build a campaign out of this. It's not just the brand going, hey, we sponsored this thing.
That's kind of almost my business model with what I'm trying to do with the podcast is exactly that. Like, there's no gatekeeping with but just for anyone that might be listening, you don't have to have a big following to come on my podcast. I've sat down with many people. I've got one booked in 2 weeks' time. 0 online presence whatsoever. Following is not a criteria. No. However, I have also sat down with a lot of content creators. I think generally because they're just more comfortable being in this kind of environment.
You find them, they're in your network.
Yeah, exactly. But the likes of doing that, I mean, today's episode, Danny Madden, fantastic bloke. And the things that we talked about will now go out to his audience. So he is now doing his part. And I've had that through quite a lot of content creators I've spoke to across the time that I've been doing it. And yeah, that is a way to make positive change, is for people to get involved, step up and just be honest. That's all it is. It's just being honest and authentic about how you are dealing with life. And it doesn't have to be negative. You don't have to sit there with a violin out. It can be completely the opposite. It can be
a success story.
I'm thriving and this is how. This is how I deal with the pressures. This is how I deal with that. That's the knowledge we need to pass on. It frightens me, to be honest, that from a school age, there's no concept, there's no talks about, kids aren't educated in psychology. They're not really educated about mental health. They're not told what to look out for. It's a bit of a worrying thing to me.
Do you know what? It really, I don't know. I think a lot of it's to do with society and culture and stuff like that. But I remember my daughter, she's 7 now, but when she was in nursery, she just there was a period where she just went really insular and didn't want to speak to anybody. And it was so sad. You'd see her like at the table, like when you go and pick, like when you pick kids up at the nursery, sometimes you can kind of like peek through the window, you can see them all playing. It's nice. She'd just be sitting down around, just looking super sad. Yeah. You're like, fuck, like what's happening? Like, there's stuff going on that you think, I don't remember ever being sad as a kid. No. Do you know what I mean? And she's all through it now. I think it's just like a phase, and we supported her through that. And we obviously spoke to the guys there, but it's a problem that's only going to get worse, is what I'm seeing in the next generations and stuff. And I don't know what it's down to, but
I don't know, mate. I'm semi hopeful that the younger generations are getting a little. I look at my own kids, and they're a lot more aware of things, like the typical, the anxiety, the depression than I ever was. It can go the other way. I mean, my daughter in particular, so my daughter's 11, and she a few years ago came home and talked to me about how there were a couple of kids in her class that only came to school a couple of days a week because they suffer with anxiety. And she was informed by the school why that was and all that. So you have got to you've got to tread carefully, because if you overeducate or if you educate in the wrong way, kids can kind of fixate on it.
Yes.
And there's a level of me which goes, do you know what? Kids shouldn't have to worry about that. They're kids. They shouldn't have to be worried about mental health conditions. But there's definitely an age, maybe it's later down the line, where there needs to be a knowledge and education. Because like you said with your experience, if you were possibly aware of that, you might have been able to identify it more easily.
Yeah.
I think potentially it's with mental health, there's a generational thing where we're a little bit more at risk because we come from that. Don't talk, don't cry. Men, the man up generation, as it were. I'm not sure whether that's ended now, but we're still all out there. You know what I mean? Like there's still a whole bunch of blokes that are 30, 40, 50 that grew up in the society that we did, pre-social media, pre-phones, pre-TikTok, basically, which a lot of kids are picking up a lot of information on now. So, yeah, I don't know, mate. I'm hopeful maybe it will get better in terms of awareness. But there's certainly like a key demographic that need support at the moment.
I think one of the interesting things about like this movement, I've always been very open to stuff like this anyway. I've never really been the kind of person of just like, man up or whatever. There isn't obviously, you're well allowed to be masculine, and there are ways of still being strong and brave, while also being open and honest about your feelings and stuff like that. There's not. There's a spectrum on that. You're not just like a snowflake or the man up era. There's something in between those. Not that they're particularly good terms to use, but I think the awareness is great, because at that moment when I saw my daughter and I could see something was going on, even at that young age, I've got the awareness to go, there's some tools here that I can use. There's places that I can go to figure out what's going on. I know who to speak to get some advice or whatever. Whereas if there wasn't that mental health awareness out, I'd have just gone, who knows? Suck it up or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
You have to just go in and deal with it. Whereas I think, there was perhaps a situation where perhaps some of the kids weren't playing with my daughter and she was feeling sad about that. Whereas actually, if we gave her some tools to go, why don't you go and ask them? And here's some ways that you can ask them. And then eventually she did, and it got better. And we encouraged the teachers to kind of push her in that direction. And now she's like, she's the most outward kid ever.
That's good parenting, mate.
Yeah,
and life, that's what it does. It throws these obstacles at us, and the growth is all about the obstacles. It's about learning how to overcome things. So, that was an obstacle. You parented well. She's grown from that experience because she's now got those tools. She'll have kept those tools moving forwards. And I think it's a good analogy, really, is a lot of us, me personally, went through a lot of my life with no tools because I didn't know I needed them. Yeah. They didn't exist.
You were good up until that point.
Exactly, yeah. It's like I never required the tool. But then I didn't even know the tools existed. So when I did need them, it wasn't a case of thinking, oh, well, I'll just reach for that because I now need that. It was like I was completely oblivious. So like not knowing that, a saw existed. I didn't know how you cut wood. It was, I'm throwing loads of analogies out at you, but you see where I'm getting at. When you don't know that something's there, you can't prepare for it. And that's all it is just develop your tools, develop your coping mechanisms. So as and when something happens, because it will, life is not easy. It's those unexpected things that will take you by surprise. Something will come at you at some point in your life. Yeah. And it's just knowing where the tools are if you need them. You can keep them in a cupboard, that's fine. You don't have to have them out on the table all day, but you just got to know they're there and what to reach for.
Absolutely. What an amazing resource. The Talking Tradesman. Go and please, I encourage everybody to go check that out, especially if you're in the trades, but even if you're not, Who cares?
Yeah, man. Thank you.
It's an entertaining watch. I watched a good chunk of Danny Madden's, and it's really interesting. And we talked kind of off air about this. We're going to move on at some stage, but about the fact that on social media you have this presence, and it's natural. There's nothing. You naturally post the stuff that is the most relevant to your audience and the most interesting, and what you think is going to generate the most interest based on your goals of what social media is to you. So if your goal is to attract a wider audience with positivity, obviously you're going to post positive stuff. You're probably not going to post the negative stuff. So you can see these people like on social media, for the most part, it's the best parts of them. That's natural.
The highlight reel.
But actually, as you mentioned, there's a different side to everybody, and podcasts are a great opportunity to sort of be authentic and bring that out. And I love that. It was really interesting to hear that side, because it's when you get on social media, when you put the camera on, for the most part, even if you think you're being authentic, you're not. You're pointing a camera at yourself. There's an element of inauthenticity within that, but you might be pretty authentic. Podcasts are great because you kind of forget they're there, don't you?
Exactly, yeah. It's a weird one, mate, because I think you can be authentic at showing your high points.
Yes.
There's no inauthenticity. You're very authentic in the moment. You're just not showing everything. That doesn't make you not authentic.
No.
It just means that, there's a curtain. You've got what's in front of the curtain, what's behind the curtain. It's still you.
Yes.
But there's a part that you keep private, and everyone's entitled to that. There's certain things I would never put out.
No.
And everyone's going to have those things behind the curtain. But there's definitely some value, I think, to giving people a little peek, just the front of the show stuff. It's like showing the warehouse, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's opening the doors up a little bit to go, there's the shop front. Here's the warehouse where all the work's done. Do you know what I mean? This is what, and that's one of the things from the content creators side that I've experienced through my podcast is I think it's been really beneficial to a few of the people that have come on to show that warehouse, show the motivations, I can use a few examples. I mean, I sat down with Alex Berman, Ariot Carpentry, and he walked out of my studio and I looked at him differently because he sat there and he talked about his motivations, why he's doing everything he's doing in terms of working with all the brands he's working with, what he's trying to achieve and why he's trying to achieve it. And, that's Alex's story to tell, so I won't go into that. You can tune into my podcast and find out.
Please do.
But it really, to me, him doing that adds more value to him as a content creator because it offers up the whole package a little bit more, It
kind of leads me on to kind of how brands, I guess, and content creators can utilize podcasts as a format, because I think it's still one that's not. It's surprising because a lot of people say that podcasts are so saturated. I'm like, how many construction brands do you know have got a podcast?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Got a good podcast. There's a difference.
There's a big difference there.
We talk about this a lot. There's we produce podcasts for construction brands as well. There's nuances and it kind of depends on your goals and what you want to achieve with a podcast, but massively underutilized piece of marketing material that or a marketing channel, that can do multiple things. So, for example, a brand who is looking to appeal more to problems like mental health.
Yeah.
They have a format, they have a channel and a platform. They could get someone like yourself on who've got a good following. You've already got a big audience to come on and talk about a particular problem or situation or a topic. You bring your audience with you, and you're well versed to talk about that particular problem that's on the marketing strategy. We want to, as part of the marketing strategy, we want to be addressing a few issues. That's a huge platform. You imagine just trying to figure out how to do that without a podcast. There's obviously ways and means about it, but
I mean, I think personally it would be a really good marketing strategy for more brands to open up a little themselves. What I mean by that is you want to make a connection between your brand and your customer base. A lot of brands, you will see the glossy sign or the logo. And that when you think of a brand, you think of the logo. Logos are great, but if you were to experience maybe a few more CEOs, a few more managing directors that came on podcasts, they can talk about their brand, but they can also talk about how they've established the brand and their own personal trials and tribulations, give that human connection that then when people think about said brand, they're going to think about, oh, actually, I heard about their origin story. I heard about how that actually started in a great example, mate, Gymshark. Everybody knows Ben Francis started Gymshark in his garage. You know what I mean? At his mum and dad's house. There's that personal connection to Gymshark. I think one of their strong marketing points is that people know where it started and where it's gone. I think a lot of well-established brands, they don't have that personal origin story behind them. And I think it would be very beneficial. You know, connect with your audience, connect with your customer base. And podcasts are a brilliant way to do that. And you're quite right. I mean, people might think the podcast market's saturated, but how many proper podcasts are out there?
Yeah.
There are, this is not discrediting anybody that does a podcast. There are different levels of podcasting, just as there are DIY and professional tradespeople. There are DIY podcasts, you know, and I would say that I've only maybe just moved out of that by taking on the space that I've took on. But when you're talking about remote podcasts over Zoom, things like that, it's not the same as this.
No.
You know, this is a professional podcast studio with a professional setup and professional equipment and a produer.
Yeah.
And all these kind of things that you can't,
with your mental health.
You can't compare the two.
No. And what the real thing about brands can afford stuff like this.
Yeah.
You know, they can afford to make it jazzy. They can afford to, just say can, like not all brands are loaded, of course, but, you know, there are situations where you can produce stuff like this and afford to be able to get guests on and do this on a regular basis and open up that communication with your audience. And what I think a lot of brands are scared about is there's almost like there's two forms of podcasts that kind of come up, which is we do a podcast. A lot of brands, they want to talk about what they do.
Yeah,
no one gives a shit about what you do, I'm afraid. Like most of the time, you know, you get a company that wants to talk about all the amazing stuff that they're doing within. Let's take an engineering firm that does M&E construction for whatever. If they just talk about themselves the whole time and they get guests on and stuff like that, there is some benefit to that from a marketing point of view. But it's not going to get great numbers and it's not going to get a lot of interest. It is very much like you are really targeting that towards your customers, target audience and stuff like that. You just kind of, I always call it willy waving. You're just showing how clever you are. Not a lot of people are going to have a lot of interest in that, but it might work. And you have to sort of gauge, you know, what you want to achieve from that. And there's another sort of form of podcast, which is like a general interest podcast, where let's say you're a construction brand and you want to create a podcast that is related to the general interest of your target audience, so tradespeople. Trade Legends is a really good example of that. Or something like where really, that's just an interesting podcast if I'm in the industry or not. Like, you know, I'm not a tradesperson, but I still love Trade Legends, still love listening to it. Yeah. So what you're doing there is you're not really telling anybody, like Unilight aren't telling everybody how amazing they are. Or you know, whatever. They might put a sponsored ad in there or something like that. They might like sort of give it a mention, but for the most part, they're creating content that is relatable and entertaining for their target audience, much broader target audience, their customer. But they're not shoving the product down your throat. But you can see their branding everywhere. You know that the Trade Legends is kind of a Unilight podcast.
It's perfect. It's subliminal. But what I feel it does is like the Trade Legends podcast, shout out to the guys there. I've been on it myself. It's a great setup, great lads. It creates that value. So they're giving you something for free. You know, it might not be a physical item. They're giving you entertainment for an hour.
Yes.
So I've given you that. And what that does then to the customer, it provides that feeling of worth, that feeling of I'm part of this. And then you kind of think, well, hold on, they've given me something. So do you know what? If I need a new site light, I'm going to check them out first.
Absolutely.
Because I like them, you know, and they're likable, like Al, very likable person. You know, so there's that personal connection again, though. I feel like I know him.
Yeah.
Because of his podcast. How many other brands can you say that about?
Absolutely.
Do you even know who the owner of most brands are?
No. Absolutely not.
But there's that personal connection, and they've tapped into their audience perfectly.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, they've brought on their target demographic. They've given value to. It's all about giving to receive.
Absolutely.
So they've given the listener entertainment for an hour, and they've also given the people, the guests, exposure, which can then lead to opportunities for them as content creators, brand deals, ambassadors, recognition, custom base. There's so many positives. One of the expressions I love is a rising tide raises all boats. And it's leaning into that. Is sometimes if you want something, you've first got to give.
Yeah.
You've got to give out. You've got to provide something for your customers and not expect anything back. And then actually you'll get stuff back.
Yeah.
You know, it's a little bit of a hypocrisy really in saying that you're doing it, you're giving something without expecting anything, but really the long-term goal is you are expecting something.
Absolutely.
But that's all of us. We're all trying to achieve something. You're trying to achieve something with this podcast. I'm trying to achieve something with mine. The reality is that. But if you're giving out value, I think it's a great marketing strategy.
We all know it's not entirely selfless. You know what I mean?
Of course not.
We can all see through that, and that's not a bad thing. I think this is one of those things that we all know that you're doing this because you know you want to get something from it, whatever that is. Everyone does something to get something.
Yeah.
But you imagine the alternative of if Trade Legends was actually just Unilight podcast, for instance, and it just for every single episode they talked about Unilight products.
Yeah.
Imagine how many people
It'd die after 3 episodes.
Love the Unilight products. They're great. I don't need to subscribe to their podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's really, really clever. And what I find a lot of brands will do. So you got Al, you got Mark Tiff, who are kind of like the hosts of the podcast. Entertaining guys, got a lot of stories, relatable. Some brands will go like, well, we're just a load of sales guys. None of us are on the tools in here. We haven't got someone who could be the host of, let's say, a podcast or something like that. So they'll be put off by the idea of that. What they could probably do is talk about the product. But again, there's a market to that, and there are some situations where that would be okay. But it's not going to be that successful on Spotify and YouTube and stuff like that. You can push that by email to your target audience of like a few people that are big buyers of those things, whatever. So brands who want to like be in on the podcasts, but they perhaps don't have the resource. A lot of them don't realize that you can just slap your name on someone else's podcast.
Yeah, gotcha.
Like 100%. Like a really, really good example is, let's say Keelan, my guy Keelan, had a podcast that was specific to I don't know. Let's say it was a copy of Trade Legends. Perhaps not a copy, but it's a topical podcast around the construction industry and particular trades. My guy's got a decent following on that platform and all that kind of stuff. And he's already built his target market is absolutely perfect for Milwaukee, let's say.
Yeah.
Most of those guys are probably going to be interested in a Milwaukee product of some description. So Milwaukee, rather than creating their own podcast, they just slap their name on Keelan's podcast.
Yep.
They don't shove it down people's throats. They go, hey, listen, let me support your podcast.
Perfect. Yeah.
We are going to put some branding knocking about. Would you mind if we have an ad or two? And perhaps it gets a mention, but we're not going to talk about Milwaukee. We're not going to talk about the products. That we're not going to change the format at all. You can keep your podcast, but we want to support it and give you a shitload of money. But eventually, people will start to associate your podcast with our
marketing
brand.
by association, isn't it, Dan?
You ain't got to do anything.
No.
All you got to do is go do us a favor. Like we'll give you some money. You can do up the set and stuff like that. That's absolutely mental. They could do the same for your podcast, for my podcast.
Yes, Dan. At the minute, so like I say, we've just opened our new studio, it were,
which looks great, by the way.
Thank you, appreciate it. That came to fruition a couple of weeks ago. It's been mad since then, so I haven't actually spent much time in it because I've been at trade shows and things. But we are, as of mid-December, we're looking for a new headline sponsor for exactly that. And if someone wants to reach out, but that opportunity is there. So I have deliberately built the studio so it is not overly branded. Somebody else can bring their branding in and do exactly what you just said, which would be to provide background, product placement or banners or whatever it might be. Associate yourself with what's already built. The product is there.
Yeah.
And you're going to do that. You're going to do your marketing by association. It's the Unilight model, essentially.
Yeah.
Exactly what they've done.
Well, you've already built it. You've done it.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what I love about this kind of thing is like, who's your target audience? Tradespeople for the most part. You might get some miscellaneous people, but just for the nature of the branding and stuff like that, you got people in the trade or generally people in the construction industry. But let's say, for instance, I'm guessing that for the most part, your audience is tradespeople.
Yeah, 90%, 99%. Yeah.
So if you're a brand that only really sells to or their primary customer is tradespeople, what you've got there is an audience. Let's say you get I don't know. I'm not going to guess numbers. I'm just going to make up numbers. Let's say you get 10,000 listens an episode. So that's 10,000 of your target audience tuning in every single day to a person that they trust. Imagine if you put a little bit of an ad in there. Just like, this is the such and such, we're produced or sponsored by this product.
Yeah.
You don't have to shove it down people's throats. Like,
no, you don't.
What a marketing opportunity
The
that
thing
would
is,
be.
Dan,
And all you're doing is supporting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, as well, with podcasts, and like I'll use mine for example, yours will be the same. So not only have you got the podcast and the inserted ad, so you've got your listener download figures, but then you've got each podcast, like mine, will have social media channels. So we're present and active on every social media channel where we put out our clips, our shorts and things like that. So all of those can then be marketed or targeted to. If you got something in the background, it's subliminal. So not only could you have 10,000 downloads, but it's quite possible that you're then going to have hundreds of thousands of views on clips and shorts that, again, you can utilize all of that with it. Like, to me, podcasts are an untapped goldmine.
Yeah.
As well as that, you look at traditional marketing methods, so radio ads, TV ads back in the day, and things like that. What's going to happen with those?
Yeah.
Who's listening to the radio at 10 a.m.? They might hear it. With a podcast, it's selective. So somebody's going to listen to it when they have time, when they want to watch it. Same with social media shorts, YouTube shorts. They're going to watch it when they want to watch it. It's permanently there. And with a podcast, if it does well, generally speaking, because I don't know about you, I listen to loads of podcasts. And when I come across a new one, I'll listen to an episode that will catch my attention and then I'll binge the back catalogue. So if you were to support a podcast through terms of advertising and things like that, you're going to have, the value keeps accumulating. Your ad hasn't been out there and then it's done. It's out there forever. And then when people binge backwards, as they always do, you're getting the exposure potentially years down the line from an ad that you paid for in 2025 is still being viewed in 2027.
That's mad, isn't it? You can't get that on the radio.
No, you can't.
That's like it's a one-off thing. You're right, Kate.
Yeah, we've overheated.
Just on that piece. That's all right. It's only my camera. Who gives a shit?
No more Dan.
It's massive. Like the opportunities are absolutely huge. If you're interested in sponsoring a podcast whose primary target audience is construction, people who work in construction, give Russell a shout. Good opportunity.
I mean, the thing is, you said it's a saturated market earlier. Is it really?
No, it ain't.
Because I can't think of that many.
In your niche, no way. Absolutely
There's
not.
maybe 3, 4.
Yeah,
that are out there. So
you think about like my podcast's so niche. It's because it's an interesting one because my podcast is related to marketers in construction, so much more niche than just general tradespeople and stuff. And if you think like I don't know the stats on I don't get huge numbers on mine because it is niche, but I was really surprised. Like the YouTube does incredibly well, partly down to the guests that I get on, but even guests that are relatively unknown, relatively decent numbers. And you just sort of think, you imagine getting in a room with, even, let's say 500 people. You get a room with 500 people and you get to talk about your product.
Yeah.
And they're actively listening. You can't skip an ad. Well, it's difficult to skip an ad on, what's his name, on Spotify, for instance. There's so many opportunities to do that. Yeah, there's not a lot of brands that want to sponsor mine, unfortunately. There's not a lot of companies who their target market is marketers in construction. It might be like a HubSpot or something like that.
Personally, you say that though. I believe that brand awareness, like, why not?
Yeah,
brand awareness, just getting out there. Like you said, you haven't got to talk about your product because it's got limited legs. You're 2-3 episodes, you're done. Nobody wants to hear that on repeat. To me as well, like me personally, like I come from the decorating industry, and when I've discussed doing my podcast with people, and I've had people want to come on and talk about tools, and I've kind of pushed it away because for the same thing, I think I'm now 56 episodes in, whatever it might be. Would you want to listen to somebody talk about painting walls 56 times? No. The great thing to me, I've got a huge interest in people. The reason being everyone's different. Everyone's got their own story. So like you just said, you don't have to talk about your brand and your item. You can piggyback on the back of all that interest by associating yourself with. And you could drop in the odd little thing here and there. You get a new product launch. Okay, we'll put a new ad in about that product.
Yes.
And then you've got that targeted demographic. You've got 60 seconds of an ad inserted mid-flow into a podcast. Like you just said, not many people skip them because generally speaking, I know what I do when I listen to a podcast, which is put it on my headphones, put it in my pocket. It's more hassle to get my phone out, unlock it and skip it than just go, do you know what, 60 seconds. So I think, podcasts are hugely currently underutilized media form for marketing.
And what's really cool, I will go on to my last topic, and this is kind of like our like business model for a new project that we've got coming up. Everyone knows, well, I'll explain what, a podcast network is essentially, this is kind of like a gross plug for Dissident, but I've started, so I'm going to finish it.
Do it, man.
So a podcast network is, a solution where a brand can go to a company and like Dissident, and they will create the podcast, bring in the talent, do all the marketing. They basically do everything for them. That's kind of what Dissident can do. It's something that we've been playing around with, where that network hosts and looks after multiple different shows for different brands and stuff like that. So one of the things that we came across, and we actually trialed this. It didn't go ahead, unfortunately. I won't go into the details of it, but with someone who had like I think it was like 5 million followers on Instagram, massive, huge local celebrity. It didn't work out in them because of the nature of how they wanted to do it. It wasn't like the deal didn't go sour. It's just they had very specific requirements, which meant that we would never get paid. So we kind of pulled out of it. But what brands can do, and this is something that I would love to organize, is let's say you've got someone who's got a load of clout on social media. They're a big name in a particular field. Let's say it's a DIY or someone in construction who's got a really, really good cult following. They're a really interesting person. You think they'd be good for a podcast, but they don't have one yet. What you can then do is you go, well, I know for a fact that if we did a podcast, if we figured out a podcast that would work for them on a specific theme, on a specific topic, and that had legs, you could keep it going. It would be instantly successful. We know it would work. You don't have to build it up. We know that this person will bring some eyeballs to whatever they put their mind to. What you can then do is you can just pluck a brand out and you can go, hey, listen, you can support this for a year. For a cost. You've got to pay for it, obviously. And then we're the people in the middle that actually kind of make it happen. That is something that I think a lot of brands aren't considering, is the fact that I think a lot of them think you have to build up a podcast before it's successful. No. It's actually easy. Like that's what we're doing. Like people who are relatively unknown until we start it and we build it, but we're doing it out of our own dime and we're doing it for our own time and for different reasons. Whereas actually what you can do is you can get I don't know who's got a massive following. It's someone who's got a massive home improvements channel, whatever. If they decided that they wanted to make a podcast, let's say Phil or Brad or both of them wanted to make a podcast about topical things related to construction, they would get some eyeballs on that.
Oh, God, yeah, of course.
100%. Yeah. So all you need to then do is, as a brand, go, hey, we'll pay for it, but we want our kind of branding everywhere, subtle, but not in your face, an ad spot per episode, and we will pay for the whole bloody thing, and we'll get all the social content, we've got all that kind of stuff. That's a no-brainer. Like that'd be insane, because all you do is you just go production costs, whatever that is, quite expensive, but not insane for a brand. You pay the boys their rates. You just say, what do you want to get per episode based on your amount of effort? You come to agreement on that, and you come together, and that could be incredibly successful.
Seems like a no-brainer.
And a really good example of that was Zwift did that for. I'm pretty sure Zwift did it for. I'm going to get his name wrong. Is it Geraint Thomas?
Yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah,
Geraint Thomas.
The other thing I'll say, just while you're looking at that, Dan,
doing my research,
is that particularly for the construction industry, podcasts are huge. And because a lot of us work solitary, so a lot of us will either have the radio on, but I don't know about you, but if you listen to the same radio station for 8 hours a day, it gets on repeat, it gets repetitive. So a hell of a lot of people that I know and talk to will either pop an audiobook or a podcast on, whether it's the morning or the afternoon, split up the day.
Yeah.
So people in construction listen to a lot of podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
That's what goes on. So it really is a way of reaching out into the community. I would argue that people in construction probably consume more podcasts than the average industry demographic. Because like you guys, you sat over there, you're not going to listen to a podcast in the middle of the day, are you?
No.
I might listen to 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, but I'm in a few social groups. We all talk. Any good new podcasts, that kind of thing. Everyone's listening to them. It really is an industry that target podcasting.
Absolutely. I feel like I might have got this wrong, so I think I'll make a hypothetical. Essentially, take this with a pinch of salt, because I don't actually think this is necessarily true, or it might have happened, but it might have stopped now. But essentially, like Strava wanted to do a podcast, let's say. Not putting. I'm not saying this is fact. Strava, if you don't know, Strava is like an app for cyclists,
Strava,
and you can put a screen in front of you. You can go on your sort of cycling indoor cycling bike, and you can pretend to do the Tour de France or whatever. Tour de France. So really, really cool app. Loads of cyclists use it in the winter.
I used to use it myself. When I stopped playing football, I went through a stage using Strava. So,
really, really cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, not Strava. I beg your pardon. Strava is the is where you would like go running and stuff like that. I'm talking about is it Zwift? It's Zwift, isn't it? This analogy is like derailing massively. Zwift, sorry, is an app, I think, where you can you basically have your iPad, or you can hook it up to a TV, and you're it's like almost like a social media platform where you're cycling and other people are cycling, but it's like virtual. And you can go and do like Tour de France or some crazy
race each other.
And like it's really clever, and like you can do things like it can make the depending on if you're going uphill, it'll make your exercise bike like harder and stuff. Really, really clever stuff. So cyclists use it all the time in the off season, and if it's raining or something like that. So let's say they want to do a podcast, but they don't want to talk about the app. That'll get pretty boring. And let's say, for instance, they don't have anybody internally that's interesting enough that they deem would be beneficial to have a podcast. But Geraint Thomas, the cycling legend, is interesting. He's got loads of mates that are in cycling, loads of people that want to hear. If you're a cyclist, which is their target market, would want to listen to him talk about cycling. Just give that man some money and sponsor his podcast. That's all you need to do. And they basically just created this kind of podcast that produced it. I'm pretty sure he didn't have one initially until they paid for it. Massively successful because he's already famous. He's already got some clout. And your brand is all over it, and you associate then the podcast, which is talking about stuff that's relating to your target audience, with this particular brand without them having to do anything other than pay for it.
It really is. The more you're saying this, the more it's like, why is nobody doing this?
Yeah. Oh, I think the construction industry is way too scared. I think that's the theme of this podcast is, and this is something we're trying to push, is the slow to adapt. Construction as a whole for
They've
brands.
got to break the mold though, Dan, haven't they? Because everything in terms of like social interaction is evolving so fast. New forms of social media, lower attention spans, all this lot, and it's happening so quickly. So traditional forms of marketing need to evolve in line with that.
Yes.
And certainly like appealing to younger generations and just getting that reach. And how do you break the mold and become noticed in a world of people that are doing the same thing? To step out into other industry demographics that are clearly popular within that industry. Why would nobody do that?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the success of the likes of trade legends, to put myself in the category, and not to sound too egotistical, but in fact, to pull it back, I have been massively surprised by the growth of my own podcast. Never expected it at all, but it proves the demand's there.
Yeah.
The audience is there, hence why it's done as well as it's done in such a short space of time. So there's definite mileage for people to do it and produce value and, give back.
Do some good.
Exactly
Do
that.
some good, absolutely, and market yourself at the same time. Win-win.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy. So, I mean, I feel like we've got some takeaways there, and I'm happy with what we've done in terms of laying out the groundwork for podcasts as a marketing tool, but also as almost like a brand value tool as well, and to do some good. Was there anything that I should have asked you that you wished you wanted to talk about? You think, I need him to ask me this question. Is there something you want to say before we call it a day? Do you think?
Not really, mate. I mean, obviously, marketing's not my demographic.
Yeah.
I'm sort of learning to swim in different waters at the moment with a few things that I'm doing. So I'm just taking everything in. I've taken away stuff from the conversation. I've taken away a whole new avenue of approaching brands in terms of sponsoring the podcast.
Oh yeah, I'm really nerdy about that. I love that concept. It's so easy.
Yeah, mate. Honestly, it seems like a glaring, wide open avenue to lean into now. No, it's been a pleasure, mate. I really appreciate you opening up your platform to have me come and sit with you, because I'm not your normal, sort of line of conversation. And again, with what I'm doing, trying to spread the mental health awareness, and by inviting me onto here, it just does a little bit more. So you've played your part in letting me use your platform to try and spread the message that I'm trying to spread. So appreciate that, mate.
And I thank you very much for bringing your audience with you, Russell. Because it helps, doesn't it? Again, we could do a whole podcast related to just marketing podcasts, and one of the biggest ones, and it's the same with networking. Is you go on each other's podcasts, you network.
Exactly.
If you want to be. If you want to hear because a lot of the time when you're a podcast host, no one asks you questions, do they?
No.
You know what I mean? Actually, whereas usually the reason why you've gone on that podcast or why you created that podcast is because you've got a lot to say on that topic. But if you're a good podcast host, you don't actually say that much.
No.
You lean on your guests.
Yeah, it's been an evolution, mate. I'm not a big fan of listening to myself back, funnily enough, but I force myself to do it every few episodes just to lean into, am I talking too much? Am I butting in? Am I over talking? And I look at the difference between episode 1 and episode 50, and I think it's huge. I pick up on a lot of differences, but you have to listen to learn. So yeah, it's a new science. The whole podcast world is, and this is one of the things, talking about it being a marketable thing. It is so new because when I've looked into it, it's really hard to find information on how to do it, what to do. Just even setting up a podcast, it's not easy to find that information. But when it comes to marketing the podcast, how, what the value is of the podcast, when it comes to advertising opportunities, actually finding information on what to charge, what's a reasonable rate, what the value is quite difficult to come by. So it's almost, I would argue that we're still trailblazing, really. Yeah. The statistic that I started the podcast in January. My audience has steadily grown. And on the Spotify rap charts this week, I found out that I'm in the top 5% in the world of video podcasters on Spotify, which is insane. How has that happened? And to me, wicked. What that says is this is just getting started. This is so new that I've managed to climb in the top 5% with very little knowledge or experience. Yeah. So you imagine a brand supporting a professional setup like this with proper editing, proper equipment, and knowledge of the industry behind it, I think it'd be quite easy to really jump to the front of the queue in terms of exposure.
Yeah, definitely. Mate, it's mad. Top 5. Congratulations.
Yeah, cheers, mate. It was, I had no idea, mate.
No.
It was insane.
Podcasting is, without getting too nerdy for the audience, like it is one of those things where you don't really get as much data as you'd like. You know,
it's really hard to come by.
Social media is really good at giving you analytics and stuff like that. And what's interesting is it's very difficult to be able to find analytics on on a different podcast. You there's no benchmark. I find it really difficult. It's like, okay, well, how many views am I expected to get if I go to your podcast? There's no stats there to say this has been a lot of the time. This has been viewed X amount of times on these days and stuff. Whereas like on social media, you can kind of get a sense of like, like 100 likes is about the standard for a company that's doing this kind of thing or whatever. It's hard to get the benchmark, so you just kind of like wing it and see what happens.
Absolutely, mate. I think the problem is with podcasts, everyone looks at the 0.01%, don't they? They look at Joe Rogan, they look at, Diary of a CEO, they look at the real big hitters and hear these big numbers coming out. But the reality is, there's so many more below that actually, the numbers haven't got to be that high to be pretty well recognised within the industry. So yeah, it's worth gaining that perspective. But you're quite right. Looking and trying to find information is really hard right now.
Really difficult. You can look at your own stuff and get depressed about it, but like it'd be nice if I could have a look at somebody else and go, oh, okay, I'm not too far off.
To be honest with you, Dan, is another good business idea would be to launch a podcaster's guide. Just with some base facts, figures, and research, what to expect, when to expect it. How long should it take you to hit your first 10,000 downloads? Because I've looked at all this stuff and there's such contrasting opinions out there. But yeah, there's a lot of information. It's hard to pull together the analytics as well of listening numbers. Because I publish on every platform. So it's a case of going into the analytics of each one, then trying to bring it together, then trying to work out, there's a lot to it.
Well, maybe when we figure it out, Russell, we'll put together like some sort of course or something
That's
like a PDF that you can download and the proceeds will go to charity or something like that.
I think there's legs in that.
Yeah, definitely. There was something that I wanted to just finish off on then, but it kind of I got lost in what you were talking about and then kind of forgot it. But it probably wasn't that important, Key, was it? Probably just me. Just me chatting absolute shit. Russell, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolute pleasure, mate.
For everybody watching and listening, go check out the Talking Tradesman. I don't know why I know it's Talking Tradesman, but for some reason I look at your hoodie. I'm like, oh, I'm so terrified of getting.
Do you know what it is? It's because the clothing range, I haven't actually really put it on there.
Okay.
And there's reason for that, just to jump into a bit more. But when I launched the clothing range, which we have a clothing range to support the podcast, I didn't want to just emblaze the Talking Tradesman across it, because to me the most important thing is the message, which is let's talk, let's listen. And I thought myself that marketing a clothing range with the Talking Tradesman on, which would be a bit of like, I guess, like almost like fan merchandise, has only got so much legs in it. With what I've done, it is about spreading the message more than anything. And to me, I just felt people would support the movement rather than support the brand. So all of the clothing, the Talking Tradesman, is minimal. I mean, it's literally down there. You can barely see it. So it's on there, but it's not front and center because that's not what it's for. So yeah, the clothing is there to promote the movement.
Amazing. Go buy some clothes and go listen to the podcast. Russell, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, mate, honestly. It's been a pleasure.
Off air, we'll geek out about podcast production and other marketing things and stuff like that.
Absolutely, mate. Appreciate your time. Thank you.